call, please?
We'll let Rachel do it.
Rachel, sorry.
All right, so our first one, JB Banks,
Yes, I'm here.
Jill Burgess,
Yes, I'm here.
Haley, we know you're here. Otis Northington,
Hey, I'm here.
Billy Rich,
Here.
Jim Rose,
Here.
Tanya Stewart,
Here.
Kathleen Garber,
Here.
and Vicki Miller. I believe she's the missing one right now.
Okay. Thank you for doing that, Rachel, and we can proceed with our agenda.
The first item is the approval of the minutes from the February meeting.
I believe our minutes were sent out to everyone, and after having reviewed the minutes, is there any questions about the minutes? If not, could I get a motion to approve the minutes for the last meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded.
Who made the motion? Was that JB?
Yes.
Who made the second?
Billy.
Okay. I have to do a voice vote now to approve it.
Okay.
Motion has been made and seconded.
Haley,
Aye.
Aye.
JB,
Aye.
Kat,
Aye.
Billy,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Manya,
Aye.
and Otis.
Aye.
Thank you. That vote has been passed. We'll move on with the next agenda item.
Okay. Next item is we just wanted to share with the commission what public assembly facilities staff has been doing to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and what the impact of the pandemic has been on operations. So I'm going to turn it over to Robert Mulhern and let him share that information with you all.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. Thanks. I'll just take a quick moment. If you guys want to look at the first sheet that kind of got the list of events that's canceled, that just breaks down everything that we've had to date that we're aware of. Pretty much through the June 10th weekend. As you know, all of hockey season was canceled. The first game that we would have had scheduled was March 21st. That was canceled all the way through the end of the season, which usually goes into the end of May. So all playoffs are canceled. And then just going down through the list, anything that we had in between, all of our trade shows that were scheduled, our big car show we have every year. So all the way through this June 10th date we're at a total operating impact in revenues of about $234,000. That includes any concessions, parking possibilities, staffing and equipment revenues, and then rent. What's not listed on there, which is a separate sheet, is Bowman Gray. As you guys can probably assume, Bowman Gray races were canceled from day one as well. And then to date, that is 5 races that have been canceled for Bowman Gray. And just looking forward, obviously we're not sure when we're going to reopen and at what phase that might be. We're treating ourselves under the mass gatherings kind of listing. So we'll kind of work as those phases come along, and the mass gatherings, I think we need to be in the hundreds before we even consider opening any events here. Because as our facilities are defined, even if it's an outdoor event, that is considered a single space location. Are there any questions on that sheet? Okay, great. And just while I'm going, I'll go ahead, and if you guys look at it, I also included the public assemblies facilities return to action pandemic plan. This is a worksheet that staff has been working on with a lot of input from outside organizations. We've had conversations with folks as far as Tampa, Florida, with the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Tampa Bay Rays. We've seen contact with the Miami Dolphins. So we're getting information from as many places as we can for when we do reopen, that we have the appropriate guidelines in place, not just for the city, but just nationwide. We're working with the IAFE, the International Association of Fairs and Expositions, on their reopening guidance. We've got a good working handbook that we got from the IAAPA, which is the International Association of Parks and Attractions. And I don't know if anyone's had a chance to open and review that. I'm not going to go through every piece, but if you see something in there or see something missing, let me know. We've got everything covered, from concessions to ticketing to even right now for our concerts that are tentatively scheduled for June and July, where we've ended up spacing all the seats out every 4 or 5 seats and alternating rows. So that way, if someone did want to purchase seats right now, they could, and they'd be socially distanced in our facility. We've talked with our staff as far as when concerts do come back, we'll have a touchless entry process as much as possible, where you can buy your ticket in advance. You show it on your phone at the door. We can scan your phone without touching it, and then you can go straight to your seat and sit down. So that's kind of one of the things we've been talking about concert-wise, when that happens, when we're ready to open. But I think that's it in a nutshell. If anyone has any questions on any of that information, feel free, let me know.
Robert, JB, I know a lot of things have been canceled, and I'm thinking about some of the budgetary implications and loss of revenue and that kind of thing. Do we know, just a ballpark figure of what we'll be losing in revenue with the cancellation of playoffs and all these other kinds of events? And the second part of the question would be, how are we planning to sort of recoup that in the next budget cycle?
Yeah, thanks, JB. If you look at that first sheet I mentioned, the COVID Impact 3.0, I think it's titled in your packet, that's got all of our events to date that have been canceled, and it's about $234,000. And what we're working on now is a lot of those events do want to reschedule and still have their event. I'd say 70% of them still want to have their event. So now the problem we're running into is we have other regularly scheduled events from July, August, September, and now I've got 20 other events that also want to be July, August, September. So my issue right now is having the buildings available for them to reschedule into, because once September hits, we go straight into the fair. And at this time, we're still planning the fair as normal. We're working on handbooks and reopening guidelines for the fair that will be as ready as we can be. And obviously, there's going to be a handful of other fairs that open before us, and we'll take guidance from what they did successfully and not successfully. And then we're right back to back with the State Fair and Mountain State Fair of North Carolina, so they'll help us kind of, spin that wheel as well. So I don't know how we make up for it. In short, I just don't know how we do that without the space and the time. It's just lost time.
I understand. Thank you.
Any other questions, discussion?
Would you like me to talk about the Benton and what we've lost now, or do you want to wait till the budget season stuff?
Well, I mean, if we're ready to move on to the budget, I think we can talk about that as part of the budget discussion.
Okay.
But I think just to reiterate something real quick before we move on, that Robert said, I mean, from the city standpoint, it's the mass gatherings guidelines that's going to drive how we proceed. Right now it's less than 10, and not knowing how those guidelines will be relaxed in phase 2 and phase 3 and subsequent phases. That's kind of what's ruling the day for us, both at the fairgrounds and in particular at Bowman Gray Stadium, because we're getting inquiries about racing. So we'll talk a little bit more about the assumptions we're using for next year's budget. But it's that mass gathering, the gatherings requirement looking to. Okay, so moving on to the budget. So typically we present the budget to you all, in April, but we didn't have a meeting, but we still, one of the main reasons why we wanted to call this meeting, it was number one, to give you an update on how we're working through COVID-19, but also to share with you budget outlook for all of our public assembly facilities for next year. And what you're going to see are some pretty dire outlooks. I'm just going to be very upfront about it. Grant and Steve Haverlick with the budget office are going to present the budgets for our various facilities, and be happy to discuss in more depth with you all about the assumptions we're using, but we're trying to be very conservative in estimating our revenues for our facilities going into next year. And so certainly we hope that we'll be able to be operational sooner rather than later, but we honestly just don't know. And so that's why we're trying to be very conservative with our budget estimates. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve and Grant.
All right, thank you, Ben. And good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Public Assembly Facilities Commission. Just bear with me 1 second. Let me pull up the PowerPoint, and you should be seeing it on your screens. Does everybody see it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, excellent. So as Ben alluded to, and as you can see on the agenda, we have a resolution before you recommending to the Mayor and City Council the approval of the proposed FY 2021 operating budgets for the Benton, Winston-Salem Fairgrounds, including the Carolina Classic Fair, Bowman Gray Stadium, and the downtown ballpark. We're going to kind of take you through these various facilities and how the budgets look, and talk about some of the assumptions we're making going into next year, mostly all related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So to start, this is the HVMG operating proposal for the Benton. And so for this slide, I'm going to turn it over to Grant.
I'd like to start off and just kind of give you a little heads up of where we are and what's happened since March the 8th, when we had our last event here at the Benton. We've lost about $1.1 million all the way through November now, just with groups being or going because they couldn't come here. There's about $650,000 that would have been in this Benton year that we lost. The good news is that we do still have a couple sales folks that are still selling, and we've rebooked of that 1.1 million, 700,000 of that business. The issue is that we just don't know. We don't know when we're able to have more than 10 people into the facility. So HVMG and Ben and everyone work together, and we now have a new operating model. Right now, it's bare bones. It's only myself and an engineer that are employees here at the Benton. And when we wrote the budgets this year, we made some assumptions, bringing people back at certain times when we feel that the revenue is going to start to come back. We wrote the budget 3 times, obviously one before March the 7th, then 2 other versions of this. We wanted to be as conservative as possible. So as you see there, this year we had budgeted 3.8 million. This next year was 2.3. I think it's important to know that we would have probably hit the $5 million note this year if we would have still seen all the revenue. In March alone, we would have had we were forecasting almost 700,000. We only had 140,000 in its first 8 days of March. So we just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if we can have 900 people. We don't know if we can have 400 people. We don't know if we can only have 200 people in the building alone, or can we have 200 people in multiple buildings? So it's a lot of questions still out there, and we were as conservative as we could be. The first 6 months are very conservative, and then moving into the second 6 months, we did amp it up a lot in the second 6 months. But the good news there is that some of the staffing, if it doesn't happen in the revenue column, then we will be able to. We won't have brought those folks back yet. So as we move through the summer, we'll add a couple other people back. One of those positions being one of the chefs that we'll bring back, so that we can menus that will be COVID friendly. So that's going to be important for us to come out of the gate and be able to have the right menus, the right way to sell things. Other things that we had to consider with the budget this year were, we've got to be clean. Everything's got to be clean. Have to add hand sanitizing stations that we don't have. It's all about people seeing people cleaning at all times. So, in the rooms area, which is for us the housekeeping area, we amp that up each month for gloves, masks, things that we just don't know if what the rules and regulations are going to be moving forward. So we did build some of that into the budget. And it is a drastic change. This is almost as low as it was during renovation, honestly. But there is, if the revenues do not come, I do feel that we have enough area to flex so that we can react to the revenue. Looking at this year, how we're gonna right now, we will not have another event until June at this point, unless the governor changes things, and we'll be able to open up the doors. Any questions on how we wrote the budget this year and any of our assumptions?
Well, this is Jim Rose. What kind of data did you use to develop your assumptions? Like,
well,
40% reduction in banker revenue.
We looked at our first model was we were going to do 50% of what we did last year in the first 6 months, and then we took it down to 25%, and then in the first couple months, it's way down. It's like I said, we've really built the revenue more in the second half, thinking that the attendees will feel more comfortable coming out to the facility. And I think nobody wants to be the first place to have a meeting, or nobody wants to be the first group to have that first meeting. So
Yeah.
To be honest with you, home educators, who is one of our largest groups, is usually here. We'll be checking in this Thursday, and they've moved to August. I don't believe they're coming. I mean, that's 7,000 people. So we didn't budget for them, but they're still on our books right now for that month. So and then the second half of the year probably is about 50% of what we would have done in that time. Good news is, one of the largest social events still booked with us during this whole thing. The Juvenile Diabetes Foundation booked their gala for February of next year and signed their contract the first week of April. So, people are still booking. It's just we need some direction from the governor of what's going to be allowed and how it's going to be allowed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Grant. And moving on, Grant kind of handled on the HVMG, side. And the current slide in front of you is kind of how it looks on the city's budget side. And so we're showing our current year's budget versus what's going to be proposed for FY 2021. And so the city covers a management fee for the Benton. It covers the operating deficit and then some other expenses. These are some funds for building maintenance, insurance, things of that nature. You can see with the large increase in the operating deficit, you see an over $420,000 increase in expenses. The city covers the subsidy for the Benton. Two of its funds, the occupancy tax fund, which is generated from hotel motel revenues, and then our general operating fund. You can see the changes year to year. The occupancy tax fund has also had to bear the brunt of this pandemic. No one staying in hotels has drastically reduced that revenue, and so we've had to drastically reduce how much the occupancy tax fund can assist in the subsidy for the Benton. So you see that reduction from 300,000 to 240,000. The general fund is then picking up the slack with an increase from 496,000 to 979,000. So overall increase from 796 to about 1.2 million. And in a few slides, you'll see kind of how that's looked historically of the subsidy. But Grant alluded to it looking similar to how things were during the renovation, and we'll see that on the chart in a few slides. So this next slide just kind of highlights what you've seen on the previous slide. And so the operating revenues decreased overall about 40%, and there's the total dollar amount. Operating expenses also decreased, not quite dollar for dollar on the revenue side, but still a significant decrease. You see the note there about the general fund transfer increasing. And then traditionally we have $250,000 for capital, and those are included in our proposed budget, and we'll be showing the details of that on the next two slides. But first, the city share for convention center operations. You can see this history since 2011. You can see the spike in FY16 and 17. That was really the meat of the renovation. If you look to the FY19 actual, you saw only a subsidy of a little over $500,000, and that's kind of that where things were trending. And based on the pre-COVID activity, we're trending in a similar kind of direction for year end. But obviously that has shifted due to the things going on. And then so you see that FY21 proposed, which again, right in line with how we were during the renovation. I'd alluded to $250,000 in capital, and so that's the traditional amount that's appropriated for annual Benton capital. Here are the specifics that are planned, obviously subject to change based on needs and available funding. An upgrade to the HVAC control, glass replacement on the north end atrium, banquet equipment to get it in compliance with the new COVID-19 realities, replacement of banquet tables, and then some funds set aside for contingency for other needs that may come up during the fiscal year. So that's it on the Benton. Before I move on to the Winston-Salem Fairgrounds, I'll stop and take a pause if there are any questions related to the Benton's proposed budget for FY 2021. Okay, we'll move on to the Winston-Salem Fairgrounds. And so this first chart kind of shows the current year's budget, and then kind of our budgets for Fairgrounds administration, our non-fair events, and then the Carolina Classic Fair. And so starting with the non-fair events, the assumption we've made is about a 25% reduction in operating revenues. And our thinking behind that is that's about the first quarter of the fiscal year. And we really don't know where things will stand with gatherings or events taking place at that time. So we just want to be conservative, but also give ourselves some flexibility and maneuverability within the budget and kind of reassess as we get closer to September and October. The expenses on the non-fair event side also reflect a 25% reduction. It's not across the board for all object codes. It's really ones that are just event-based. Electricity, for example. If there's not going to be an event, we don't have to turn the lights on in the building. We've adjusted the budget accordingly. Fairgrounds administration, taking it back one column, that budget is not adjusted for COVID. That's mostly staffing, and so we are assuming staffing will be operating at their full capacity throughout next fiscal year. And lastly, the Carolina Classic Fair. On the expense side, those are about the same, maybe a slight tick. We're proceeding as expecting to have the fair. So all the advertising and prep work will still have to take place. However, on the revenue side, we've reduced revenues by 25% across the board for Carolina Classic Fair. And that's just an assumption that even if the event goes on and gatherings are allowed, less people are going to venture out. There'll be so much uncertainty with kind of what events will look like and and whether people will venture out like they have traditionally in the past. So you see at the bottom there, net income loss for kind of each of the sections. At Carolina Classic Fair, it shows an addition or an income of about almost 350,000. Traditionally, that budgeted number is closer to 900,000 or a million, and so that's really bearing the brunt of the impact to the fairgrounds budget. The proposed column there to the right in green, that's a summary of all the Winston-Salem Fairgrounds, and so we're currently budgeting a projected loss of 989,570. Comparison to last year, we projected a loss of about 240,000, and really the brunt of that, as I mentioned, is this reduction in those Carolina Classic Fair revenues. Similar to the Benton, this slide just shows kind of a highlight, kind of the total dollar amounts, operating revenues for non-fair events down about 233,000, and then the Carolina Classic Fair 743,000 to make up that almost $1 million reduction in budgeted revenue. On the expense side, operating increases, as I mentioned, are decreased for the non-fair events, just assuming that nothing will happen in the first quarter. Assumes the Carolina Classic Fair will proceed as scheduled. And in addition to the budget, when we talk about Bowman Gray, we'll see that there's a subsidy needed, and the Winston-Salem Fairgrounds Fund will be handling that subsidy. That total is $72,640. If for some reason the situation changes and gatherings are allowed at a sooner date, we do have the ability to adjust the budget accordingly, and so we can reflect any revenues we may see or expenses we may see if events happen sooner than we're currently projecting within the budget. Slide just shows the historical fair attendance total, and then also tickets. So you can kind of see the history. That dropped in 2019 versus 2018. If you recall, this past fall, I believe the last Sunday of the fair was basically overcast and rain and storm, so that one day less of attendance kind of affected that drop. If you recall, 2018, it was near perfect weather the entire week. And this is updated with our year-end estimates and budgeted for FY21. The total Winston-Salem Fairgrounds Fund Reserve. So we grew slightly from FY18 to FY19. Not having events taking place is affecting, showing a little bit of a loss for current projections year-end. And that near $1 million loss that we're budgeting, as we see that significant drop-off. The FY22 projections and on go back to kind of standard operating. That's just the assumption we have. Again, that seems so far in the future at this point, and we'll adjust this accordingly as more information kind of develops throughout this pandemic. And so I'll pause again if there are any questions related to the Winston-Salem Fairgrounds budget or to the Carolina Classic Fair budget.
Hey, Steve, this is Otis. Sort of a general question. As we look at the reduction in expenses, and one, thank you guys for the work you put into this, because in my job and some other stuff I'm involved in, this is very difficult. The budget decisions are really, really tough to get comfortable with, and putting your name on the forecast or an appraisal or something like that is probably a dicey thing to do, just because of the unknowns. But when looking at the expenses and we're making the reductions, and I know you have given thought in this, but any visibility into what you're projecting the increase in expenses related to the additional cleaning, the additional facilities such as the sanitizing stations, any commentary on that, any other municipalities or entities you guys have reached out to get some thoughts on what that additional cleaning and staffing of that? There could be some redeployment of staff that we already have that we can redirect to those tasks, given that we'll have lower attendance. But just sort of throwing that out there for any commentary you guys have.
Thank you, Otis, and I'll defer to Robert and Cheryl on kind of how that could kind of be impacted when events do start to take place again.
Yeah, I'll jump in, Otis. Thank you. As far as the fair goes, we held steady while we reduced certain, kept the revenues the same. The Based on an attendance outlook, we kept our expenses for staffing and supplies fairly similar with that expectation that even though there may be some cut in staffing, there would still be an additional piece there uh, for, like you said, the cleaning or the extra working staff at the front of the gate. So fair wise, we don't have much. I'll let Cheryl speak in a moment to that if she's heard anything different. As far as our other events, I think when we talked internally, we feel pretty good about how we currently, the staff we have, and the touch-free processes and the cleaning staff that's already in place as far as utilizing those things. We've already installed extra sanitizing stations throughout the annex and the education building, and that was done back in mid to late February, I believe, early March, when we still thought we would have events as the pandemic was progressing, but before we had anything, we ended up kind of getting shut down. So I think we've got that all covered. But as everyone knows, this is changing by the hour, by the day. So the best practice could end up coming out 2 months from now that, 4 people need to be at each entrance for each person. And so there's all kinds of what if. So we did try to take that into account.
And I know that, I like Otis' comments about resources to, for cleaning and all those kinds of things. I was also thinking about personnel reduction. Anytime you have these kind of cuts, and I think Otis was also alluding to that as well, that anytime you have to make cuts, sometimes, you have to cut personnel and still increase sort of the output, or still have to perform these duties without the necessary people at the table. Are we going to lose any folks? Based upon what I've seen, it doesn't seem that we will have to cut any or have a reduction in workforce. Am I presumptuous by saying that, or am I missing something, or is it really true that we're not going to have to lose any?
So, right now, JB, we're assuming that the full-time staffing will remain in place. Obviously, our temporary and part-time staffing can, change based on events, and I think that we've reflected that in the budget, so that is more of a variable cost. But as far as the permanent staffing, right now we're showing that staffing would remain in place. And part of it, a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're still planning to proceed with the fair. So the challenge there is we're going to incur the expenses for advertising and paying potentially entertainment contracts and that kind of thing. Even though I think an attendance will drop off, you still have to scale up to put on the event.
Thank you.
That does bring up an interesting question, or hopefully we won't get there, but if the fair is canceled, it's unable to be held, our contracts with the vendors who are coming in, concerts, jugglers, winemakers, whatnot, if the fair is canceled, is there some breakage fee, or what do you think the obligation will be toward those vendors? Any comments on that?
I'll jump in on that. So I think if the fair is canceled and it's due to some kind of governmental order, there's not going to be no one's going to be bound to owe us anything or us owe them anything, unless it's specifically written in the contracts. And the only contract that might be written in is the carnival contract, but all the other vendors will be free and clear and would get refunded if there was some kind of governmental, response for us not to have a fair. And I think we would do it either way in an effort of good faith of
Sure.
moving. We'll roll it over to 2021. We'll refund it, and that's what we did with our events. Our regular events was you can cancel, or we can refund you. We tried to do an incentive program to where if you kept your event with us and held it in this current fiscal year, which isn't going to happen at this time, but we were giving a 25% credit on their rental fee in an effort to keep them with us. So we tried to get creative on some of those things, and we want to keep our relationships and our partnerships whole getting through this.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I just, if we owed for a concert, if we it had a $15,000, $20,000 guarantee or something, and that was due and payable, whether the show went on or not, I didn't know what obligation we might have. But it sounds like that if it is canceled, then that contract is cancelable. And obviously, you want to do both, good faith and maintain your relationships with the folks out there, but also just wanted to see and make sure there wasn't anything in those leases or contracts that created sort of that obligation on us for sort of full payment. But that's good. Thanks.
Yeah, the concerts are more specific. There has to be an order for the concerts. So if there's no order and we cancel, then we're still on the hook technically for the full amount. Now I'm sure there's negotiating room under this pandemic, but as long as there's a governmental order with an entity such as that, we'll be good.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we'll move on to the Bowman Gray Stadium budget.
Sorry, this is Jane. I actually have a quick question. No, there's everything about $72,000 coming from the Fairgrounds Fund as sort of being moved to Bowman Gray to cover your shortfall. Is that typical, or is that an increased amount? Just as we're looking at that chart of the Fairgrounds Fund kind of projected out, seems like we're sort of leveling and emptying that out to some degree. Are there any plans to build that back up in the future?
Speaking on the Bowman Gray, and I'll kind of go back to the chart. In FY19, there was needed at Bowman Gray, and so there was a transfer made in FY19. The current year estimate has the Fairgrounds providing another subsidy of about $280,000 to the Bowman Gray Stadium to deal with the kind of a loss from or digital loss racing really just not happening currently. And then for the budget 21, that as I alluded to, that $72,000. From 22 on in this projection, it does not assume a subsidy. However, that may need to be the case. I just think it's even though it's only a year away, it's still kind of where things look with regards to how events are taking place, if events are taking place, and things of that nature. A large drop in the fund reserves, and they were in a pretty decent shape prior. I think a lot of it on the other end of how we build it back up is how long this takes, and then developing a plan. From 18 to 19, there was a slight increase, and so hopefully we can get back to that. But again, what's going to happen in the future, a lot depends on kind of the next, how long this pandemic has impact on the ability for us to have events.
Okay. And is it typical that receive any general fund support, or was it just out of necessity with the revised budget this year?
So I'll respond to that, Kathleen. When the city owned the Coliseum, it was our practice that any net income that was realized from Bowman Gray Stadium went to the Coliseum, but then any losses suffered at Bowman Gray Stadium were covered by the Coliseum. So the Coliseum kind of benefited from the performance at Bowman Gray, or helped cover any operating losses. So we kind of continued that practice after the city sold the Coliseum, and as you've seen, I mean, obviously the deficits have grown. Right now, we're not looking at approaching Winston-Salem Speedway Inc. or the university to reopen our lease agreements to potentially negotiate different lease rates. I think that we're really just going to try to manage through this. Part of the reason why the council sold the Coliseum was because the general fund was subsidizing the Coliseum, and so it was always the intent that the fairgrounds would be self-supporting, and I think it's a question that'll have to be discussed on the horizon if we reach a point where there has to be some kind of general fund subsidy for the fairgrounds and or Bowman Gray Stadium. But right now we're trying our best to just manage through this. And as you can see, I mean, the challenge is enormous what we're facing the next few years.
So, to jump into on Bowman Gray, the specifics of kind of what we're budgeting and what we're assuming, I'll just cut right to it. Our assumptions of what you see for these revenues and these expenses are for no racing to happen for the remainder of the 2020 season and for no Winston-Salem State football to occur in 2020. We basically reduced revenues to reflect that. So you see that reduction from $373,000 down to $234,000, and also reduce expenses likewise from $472,000 to $307,000. The budget does assume revenues and expenses and whatnot to come from racing to have a normal start in the spring of 2021. If things change with related to phase 2 and phase 3 from the governor's office, we have the ability to adjust the budget, as I mentioned, and if events do happen in 2020 from racing or from football or from both, we can adjust the budget accordingly. We're able to fully function for those events. As I mentioned, there was a projected loss that's being covered by the Winston-Salem Fairgrounds, and there you see that at the bottom at $72,640. And so this slide just kind of just mentions in bullet point form kind of what I just went through. And so again, it's just wait and see approach, trying to be conservative, but also providing us flexibility and maneuverability within the budget, which we do have.
With the projection of no further racing and no football, I know previous meetings before everything went crazy, we were selecting a contractor and getting quotes on doing the construction projects and the upgrades at Bowman Gray Stadium, and this is maybe not the best time to continue a building project, but where does that stand? And if there aren't the kind of sporting event conflicts in there, could they possibly have an expedited timeline or a lower cost because they're not trying to work around as many factors?
Kathleen, that's an excellent question. Just Ben. So we were going to give you all a briefing on the project here in a minute, but I'll be happy to go ahead and talk about it. The project team, which our architect is Walter Robbs, our contractor is Frank L. Bloom. They've been working closely with our city engineer, Robert Presswood, and Robert and myself. We are now in the design development phase of the project. Hopefully next month we'll be able to bring you all an update on specifically what we're looking to do. But this very question has been put on the table. If, according to our folks at Frank L. Bloom, that they've determined that the full scope of the project is actually about 8 months. Right now our plan all along to do the project over 3 years because we're trying to do the work in between the seasons. But they said really that the work can be done in 8 months if there are no events Bowman Gray, then they feel like that if they could start work probably in early September, they could finish the project before racing started in 2021. So we are looking very seriously at that possibility. We still have to negotiate what's called the guaranteed maximum price, and have to take that to council for them to kind of lock in what the project will ultimately cost the city. But we are, if there's any silver lining in any of this, I mean, the possibility that we could get in there and actually make these improvements and have it all done without any disruption over the next few years is something that we really want to take a close look at.
Thank you for that.
If there are no further questions related to Bowman Gray Stadium, move on to the last facility, which is downtown ballpark. And so what you see before you is this is the traditional budget for the downtown ballpark. And so the ballpark is owned by the city, and the Winston-Salem Dash kind of provide us payments, really our debts. They provide us lease payments to cover our debt service on the facility. And so that is really reflected here. I will note there's an item going to City Council to potentially defer lease payments on facilities similar to the downtown ballpark. However, they would just kind of be spread out on the back end of the lease. So we have not adjusted the budget to reflect that. But if we need to, again, we have that flexibility. If there's anything more on that, I'll defer to Ben. I know you've been handling that item a little bit in more detail.
Well, and then also I'll also look to Lisa if she wants to add anything, but I think that's what's before the council tonight is just deferring the leases. So it's not forgiveness of the leases. The leasees would still have to pay the city, but then we would spread out that 6-month deferral cost over the remaining term of the leases.
Correct.
So this is Jim Rose. So Ben, does that mean that they just total deferral for 6 months, or that it's a graduated? How does that? How is it proposed that'll work?
Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay. So they only have one payment due within the next 6 months, and that one is due on June the 1st for $772,500. So what the resolution that's being taken to council tonight says that if any payments that are due in this next 6 months period, which that's the only one, would be amortized over the life of the loan. So we just take that payment and they'd make payments incrementally over the life of the lease outstanding.
Okay, so it would just act like an escrow almost.
Almost, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's all I have on the downtown ballpark budget. And that's the last facility for consideration. And so myself or staff are happy to answer any questions. And we have the resolution before you.
The resolution before you would be recommending these budgets to the mayor and council as part of the proposed FY 2021 budget.
Thank you, Ben, for that explanation. Could I get a motion from the commission to accept the budget recommendations?
So moved.
I'll second it.
The motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further question?
Let me confirm, Mr. Rose, did you make the motion?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And Billy, did you second that?
It was JB.
JB?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay.
The call, please.
Haley,
Aye.
JB,
Sorry.
Billy,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Manya? Manya, I think you're still muted.
Aye.
And Otis.
Aye.
Thank you.
That commission, could we move on to staff updates?
Yeah, the first staff update, I'll kick off with the Fairgrounds Farmers Market. I'm going to toss it to Cheryl here, but we opened the Fairgrounds Farmers Market this past Saturday in an outdoor capacity. After reviewing the governor's orders, we determined that there is a specific exemption in there for farmers markets. So we opened with some restrictions. You had to wear a mask to enter. Sharon, I knew you were on site if you want to go over and then kind of flow into the fair from there.
I think that, can y'all hear me? Okay. I think we had a really good turnout this weekend. Rachel was there more than I was. We had about 16 vendors that we spaced up down the road there as you go into the south gate on 27th Street. I think Rachel, if you want to jump in, you can kind of say as how the people actually adhered to social distancing and the different signage we had in place. I think it was a very good event. The media was on board. They really put it out there for us. I think we even had some media show up for it. Rachel, do you want to add anything? You there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there.
Okay, I think the opening went really well. People definitely followed social distancing. We had a hand wash station before they even entered our vendor area, which most people did utilize and wash their hands before they even came in. We did require a face mask if they were to enter the vendor area. Most people already had them, but we did have some of the Nightingale masks that we were selling there, and we sold over 100 of those during the time frame of the market. And a lot of our vendors were sold out by 11 o'clock. Which was great to hear, but it was a great turnout, and Fox 8 and WXII were there reporting on the story as it was going on.
We also had some SNAP sales also, the SNAP EBT sales.
Which that's record Saturday for SNAP EBT benefits.
Yes. Does anyone have any questions? We already have 4 more vendors wanting to participate for this weekend, so we may have to adjust our layout a small bit to accommodate that, but it looks like if we have good weather, we'll have another successful market this weekend.
Yeah, this is Kathleen. I know you had kind of a listing on your website of the vendors that were going to be there and phone numbers and just sort of a general description of what they were offering, and if people wanted to call and pre-order, they could. I don't know if it would be possible to expand that, or if, vendors are pretty small and don't have a website, but to have kind of a more detailed what the pre-order options are versus just calling a number, and I know you have strawberries, but strawberries, what quantities and things like that. So I don't know if it's feasible.
Yeah, with that information, that's one of the reasons why we listed the information like we did, so they could talk directly with the farmer. At this point in time, we're not sure exactly the quantity of items or what items they do have in play. I know we had our meat sales. I think they sold out in record time this year, just simply because of the lack of meat in some of the stores. So we figured that even with the pre-order, they may not have a website, but the consumer could call them directly and maybe even hold stuff for certain people and do their own type of pre-order.
Yeah, and I'll touch on that too. A lot of our farmers at the market are the more traditional old school farmers. They're using their house phone numbers, the number they have for their business. So that's what people are calling, or they have a flip phone and they don't go out and pick that produce until Thursday evening, Friday morning. So they don't know the quantities that they're going to have a huge amount. But I did see a lot of them giving out Post-it notes with their phone numbers on them to customers that were coming this week that wanted to pre-order for next week. So I think it's definitely, as the market's going on, that's going to go up a little bit, and they're going to be forced to modernize a little bit along the way, which will be helpful for the market as well.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Does anyone got any other questions about the farmers market?
Just one thing I'll share very quickly. We are in the process of making improvements to the facility, even though we're not using it right now. So we have a mural artist who's working on two sides of the building. I got there about noon on on Saturday when most people had sold out. But those murals really look good. They're not complete yet. They'll probably be finished in about another couple of weeks. But hopefully sometime hopefully later in the summer when we can really get back into the building, we'll have a lot of mural, new signage out front, but having better air circulation, lighting in the building. So we're excited about kind of the new look. The next staff update will be about the Carolina Classic Fair. I'll again turn over to Robert and Cheryl if there's anything else. We talked about quite a bit during the budget presentation. If there's anything else that you want to share.
Yes, one thing that other than COVID, we do have a signage update. We do have most of our gate signages at all the entrance gates. Those have been in place with the new logo along with the Fairgrounds logo. If anybody's rode by there, they'll notice that the cattle barn, the painting of the new logo and the dates are up, and that looks really great. We're in the first stages of redoing the grandstand. It's kind of hard to miss now with it being the bright blue that it is, with the dark blue that it is. We are still in the process of getting the graphics up on that building. So the signage process, we are still rolling with that full force. We still do have some bids out for the main gate and the east gate of the Shore Fair. And once we get all that information together, we'll pass that along to you also. For right now, we're just still planning like we're going to have a fair. The whole industry is kind of like everyone else. We just don't know what to do. Once more fairs open up, right now we're looking nationwide. We're looking for any fair to open up to give us some guidelines to see how they handle the different things like the social distancing and how they lay out their exhibits and their grounds. So like Robert mentioned earlier, we are working hand in hand with our International Association, Fair Association. We've been participating in webinars, discussion boards. I think every other day, me and 2 or 3 of our staff are in on these things to see if there's any other information. And they're doing a great job of keeping us informed. And we're just trying to put all that together and see what happens. I agree with Steve. I think that attendance is going to be based on the consumer and how comfortable they feel coming to large gatherings. And of course, with all the guidelines from the governor, I mean, that's going to make a big difference on how we open, different procedures we have in place. I wish that the first Carolina Classic Fair would be a great one, but we can still hope for that. Does anyone have any questions, suggestions? We're open for anything right now.
I do have one question. Like with states like Georgia and South Carolina that have fully opened up, are they giving you any insight as to what their plans are?
Even though those states have, I don't think they're open fully for the large number of gatherings. The South Carolina State Fair was in on one of our webinars last week, and they are waiting. They're kind of doing the same thing we are. They're going by their state regulations, and like said earlier, I mean, right now we're at 10 people. We need to get well over the hundreds. I mean, we can hold up to inwards of 30,000 people on the grounds at one time. So it makes everyone's planning so much different, especially with the carnivals, the vendors, our exhibitors, laying layouts. So we are definitely keeping an eye on those, and we're all sharing ideas. So if one comes up with a great one, we're going to steal it and make it ours. So that's all we can really do right now, is just take it day by day. Does anyone have any other questions?
Okay. I think the last item we were going to brief you about was the Bowman Gray Stadium Improvements Project. Talked about that quite a bit. Just to give you just a quick overview of the scope. We're still trying to design towards what we consider to be the most critical improvements for the facility, and that would be utility upgrades, replacing the restrooms. We're looking at the concession stands, the field, the track, and then some other aesthetic improvements. And it's been amazing how quickly $9 million can get committed. But we feel like that we'll be able to address the critical needs that we have talked about since the city and the university announced that we would that the city would be making this investment in the facility. That's all that I have at this point. Hopefully we can, I would like to be able to perhaps provide you all a presentation, perhaps in your June meeting, to just kind of give you a more, a better look at what we're planning to do. I'm hoping that maybe we'll have some renderings and some visuals that will help you kind of see what we're working towards.
Thank you, Ben. Are there any other questions from the city staff? There are no further questions. Thank you all for your time today, and we will adjourn. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Haley
Bye-bye.
and Kat, before you get off real quick,